Well, it's finally here, the much anticipated next installment in the beloved Monster Hunter series. It's the first Monster Hunter update since the summer of 2022 when Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak came out, and to say people were excited would be an understatement. The pre-release beta for Wilds peaked with 463,000 players on Steam, which, to put that in context, is almost 100,000 more peak players than the all-time high on Steam for a game like Destiny 2. So when launch finally came on February 28th, people were expecting some high player counts, and boy did it deliver, by selling 8 million copies in its first 3 days. Truly a smashing success for Capcom. So in this video, we will be dissecting the game and seeing if it lives up to the billing. I don't want to give up too many things about the narrative, and I will try to remain spoiler-free throughout the video. So for the story, I'll just give a brief overview. You are a group of explorers who are out on an expedition to an uncharted region of the old world known as the Forbidden Lands. These lands are supposed to be uninhabited, but we find a young boy named Nata, and he informs us that his people were attacked by a monster known as the White Wraith, which was previously thought to have been extinct. So the campaign is us getting to know the people of the Forbidden Lands and helping them track down the White Wraith. I won't say much more than that, but basically you then go on expeditions and kill monsters in a lead up to a fight with the big bad. The story campaign took me around 14 hours to complete, and when you're finished, you are onto the post-campaign quests and move into high rank, where you fight tougher monsters to get better materials so that you can craft better loot. And for most people, this is when the real game begins. Monster Hunter is a long-running series where people have spent thousands of hours grinding away to be able to take down monsters in as short a time as possible. And there are some truly ridiculously skilled players at this game who operate with near perfect precision to take down any monster. The first player in the world hit HR 999 in about a week since launch. For context, I am HR 110 after about 60 hours of playtime. Granted, they are blitzing through only monsters where I am exploring the terrain or in the training area testing for videos, but suffice to say, there is a dedicated player base who loves to grind this game. So let's answer the question of, is it worth it to grind or not? And that answer truly comes down to the type of player that you are. For me, after 60 hours in the game, I have the best gun lance I can have for my build and basically all of the endgame armor sets that I would want. So if your goal is to have a game that you can grind for a bit, get the best loot that you want, and then move on, then you will get between 40 and 60 hours of playtime out of this game. But what this game does so freaking well is it is infinitely replayable. The skill ceiling is through the roof, so you can keep hunting monsters over and over again just to hone your skills and master your weapons. A lot of people like to main one weapon, but if you feel you have learned everything that your weapon has to offer, there's a whopping 13 others to choose from, all with unique playstyles and different strengths and weaknesses. I have to tip my cap to Capcom here, as I truly don't think I've ever played a game that is so well balanced. You can honestly use any weapon in this game and not only make it work, but thrive with it. This opens up a ton of ways to play the game, which again is what this game is all about: replayability. Every weapon feels incredibly fun to use, and like I said, it varies up the gameplay enough that it feels completely unique to any other weapon. Obviously, Lance and Gun Lance or Heavy and Light Bowgun have similar characteristics, but even then, they have enough differences to make them feel unique to each other. So the real endgame is perfecting your build. As you hunt harder monsters, you get rare jewels that can be slotted into your armor to really min-max. The build crafting in this game is absolutely phenomenal. There are dozens of different jewels that you can slot into your armor, and then the armor itself has different set bonuses and unique perks on it as well. So you can build into any playstyle you wish. I made one build for my gun lance that can literally tank any monster's attack outside of wipe mechanics. It centers around two main perks, guard and guard up. This makes you the quintessential tank that all lance and gun lance players should strive to be. The players that take a boss's aggro, which allows your teammates to dish out damage without fear of the monster wrecking them. Obviously you can't hold aggro the entire time, as the monsters have various movesets and attacks that will often target other players or the team as a whole, but the point is I was able to synergize perks together to be able to withstand any damage that even the hardest 5-star tempered Apex monsters could throw at me. And this was when I was still relatively early into HR. It just feels so great to be able to mix and match perks and get the most out of the playstyle that you're going for. So I mentioned that the game has 14 weapons total, but even within those, you can play those weapons in a unique way. I made that tank build with my gun lance, but then as I got further into the endgame, I upgraded my armor and my gun lance to make a build that was all about shelling. In the early game, I was using the lance portion of my weapon to great effect, because that is what my build was built around, but in the later game, I made a total shelling build that could deal out some massive damage. Sure, I had less survivability, but my damage output was much higher. It just feels incredible being able to build into two different ways of playing with the same weapon. So in the early game, when you don't know monsters' movesets, you can try the tank build. And then as your confidence and ability with the weapon grows, you can focus on dealing more damage and actually dodging or countering the monster's attacks. With Gunlance alone, you can have probably 3 different playstyles, maybe more. And I haven't played enough with the other weapons, but I'm sure you can build into different strengths on the other ones as well. My friend has a dual blade setup that is all about being a part breaker, basically meaning he can soften up the enemy and break its parts off, which is one way you gain more materials. But you could also spec into elemental damage or affinity so that you can hit more crits. Or with elemental, it can deal a certain element of damage, which is strong against certain enemies and weak against others. And the game has a whole Rolodex of the monsters that you fight and what they are weak to or resistant to. So if you really wanted, you could craft a build that is optimal for each monster in the game if you wanted to farm for max efficiency. Against Gravios, a water type heavy bowgun can absolutely wreck him, and then on certain other monsters, maybe a bow is the best. So the game is basically infinitely replayable. You could try and get the best weapon and loadout for every monster in the game. Currently, there are 29 large monsters, so you could theoretically craft 29 loadouts to best fight each one. And then times that by 14 weapons, and that's a whopping 406 builds you could make. Obviously, that is a little extreme, but the point I'm trying to make is there is so many different ways to play this game to keep you engaged and having fun each and every time you log on. However, if you need a carrot to chase to keep you playing, I think the endgame is a little stale right now, but the bones are certainly there to keep you coming back. They introduced Ardean weapons and wilds, which are basically weapons that you can craft and customize to build almost a perfect weapon for what you're wanting to do. So you farm these materials by doing investigations in the late game. So the real endgame is just farming Ardean materials and farming perfect dual skill level 3 gems. These can really enhance a build, but again, that is entirely dependent on how much you care about min-maxing. If you don't care that much, then the endgame will feel pretty shallow. And let me get into why that is. So with where I am right now, about 60 hours into the game, if there's a certain piece I want to forge, be it armor or a weapon, I'm at the point where I could go farm that monster a few times and get the reward that I want to make. For me, it really isn't that difficult. My build is strong enough that I can just go kill a monster in like 10 minutes, do that a few times until I have all the materials that I need to make what I want, and then I'm done. There are really only a few endgame viable armor sets, so once you do this a few times over, you basically have everything you will need. And the difficulty of wilds has been a big point of contention in the conversation around this game. The old school Monster Hunter games are sort of known for being extremely difficult, and in Monster Hunter World, which was the first game that I picked up in the Monster Hunter series, it too had some elements of difficulty to be sure. The big roadblock in the early game was Anjanath. I know I struggled with that monster, so it was really satisfying and rewarding when I did overcome it. This game certainly lacks a lot of that. I did the campaign solo in about 12 hours and I didn't really struggle with a single monster. I got knocked once or twice, but I never outright failed a mission in the entire run of the campaign. And to put this into context, I have maybe 100 total hours in the Monster Hunter franchise outside of Wilds. So World and Iceborne and a little bit of Rise. I'm not a straight up rookie, but I am far from an expert. My friends who are much better and also skip cutscenes and stuff only took about 9 hours to do the campaign and they were just blitzing through the monsters. And this is a double-edged sword. On one hand, I think it's great that the game is more approachable for newcomers, as I think this franchise is incredible, so the more people that get to dive in and play is basically just a win-win for everyone. Capcom makes more money so they can make more awesome expansions and future Monster Hunter titles, and the people new to the series get rewarded with an amazing experience. But without that difficulty and struggle, it also gives little incentive to improve and grow and min-max. Speedrunners are smoking basically every monster in the game in 2 to 3 minutes or less. And yes, those people are extreme outliers and literally the best players in the world, but even myself, I'm beating hard monsters with a surface level knowledge of build crafting in 10 minutes or less. It feels like there is very little challenge. There is a title update coming in April with the return of a monster from World in Mizitsune, and maybe they will introduce a tier above tempered monsters, but for now, outside of 5-star tempered Gormagala, I haven't found any monsters to be too threatening. And when I compare that to my experience with World, it does feel a little bad. I remember Basilgeuse and Black Diablos and Nergigante being quite challenging. And that brings me to another issue I have. To me, the monsters in Wilds are just less memorable than in World. And here's where the review will really start to compare with World a little bit. Granted, World was my first Monster Hunter title, so everything felt fun and unique and exciting, but in Wilds, I was missing a lot of that. The reveal cutscenes for the monsters in the campaign are awesome and super well done as always, but the monsters themselves don't stand out quite as much to me. Like Xeno'jiiva in World was insanely cool, but I don't get that same feeling with a comparable monster in Wilds that will remain unnamed to avoid spoilers. Yes, some of the monsters are undoubtedly awesome. Capcom always makes very fun and unique monsters. Uthduna is extremely cool in this game. But yeah, to me the monsters are a step below the ones in World. An enemy like Valhazak just felt so much more threatening than the likes of Rei Dao or Arkveld, and fighting it down in the Rotten Vale just felt perfect. The monster fit the environment so well. Kirin and Deviljho were massive standouts for me in World, and 7 years later, I still remember my first encounter with Paolumu in the incredibly vibrant Coral Highlands. Which brings me to my next issue with Wilds, and that is environment design. And I think Wilds suffers from a few issues here. The first is actually the introduction of the Secret. This is a mount that we can ride, and you can auto-track it to make it head directly to the monster you want to go hunt, or just anything else on your map that you set as a waypoint. This is the greatest quality of life addition that they've made in my eyes. I don't like running for minutes on end through the forests or across the desert to get to the fight. I play Monster Hunter to fight monsters, so this allows me to do it much quicker. The Secret also has a pouch which contains helpful things that you need for any investigation, like a hot drink if you are in a cold environment. Again, this is such a nice quality of life feature and something I've relied on heavily, as my main material loadout that I use before fights doesn't contain hot or cold drinks. And another huge feature this adds is being able to play with 2 weapons. If you hop on your Secret, you can actually switch weapons. This is a huge addition to Wilds that deserves to be praised. Both the Secret and being able to run 2 weapons. And the latter is an aspect that may change speedruns forever in the future. But outside of speedrunning, it's also nice just in day-to-day playing. Certain monsters may just be flat out easier to fight if you have a ranged option, so you could run a hammer for some monsters and then swap to a bow for a flying monster. Again, all great changes, but to bring it back to the environments, I find it robs you of the exploration. And trust me, the irony is not lost on me that I love the Secret and all it provides, and how I don't have to trudge through the environments, but then at the same time, I'm complaining because it feels less immersive. The environments now just feel like a backdrop for us to fight in, rather than a world that we are exploring like they did in Monster Hunter World. It's a total double-edged sword here. In World, I hated having to track the monster's footprints to finally find it and then get to fight it, and having to explore every nook and cranny of the environment for the different base camps. It felt tedious at the time because I just wanted to hunt. But what I didn't appreciate is it was getting me into each zone to explore and become familiar with it, and to appreciate the rich detail and design that went into every map. Where with Wilds, I'm not nearly as in tune with each environment. Outside of the oil well basin, they all just kind of blend together in my brain. Nothing really stands out, and I don't know if that is the fault of the developers for making worse environments in Wilds, or if it's a result of me not taking the time to appreciate them. Regardless, the magic of each space feels diminished compared to how they felt in World. Like I said, I can still picture in my brain running into that Paolumu in the Coral Highlands. I thought that was such a beautiful and unique space, and truly each world felt different and unique in Monster Hunter World, where in Wilds, to me, they don't feel as special. So another problem with the environment may just come down to the visual fidelity of the game. I'm very lucky in that in November I upgraded my rig with a 4090 and a ton of top of the line components. So Wilds runs about as well as it can for me, yet the visuals still look washed out and dull. And for a lot of people, the game just flat out runs like shit on their hardware even if they have a semi-decent setup. I know mods have already been created to make the game look more visually appealing, but why in 2025 are we releasing such unoptimized games? I know 3 people personally who are waiting to buy the game until it gets better optimized, or until they save up enough money to upgrade their machine to play the game properly. And I'll be honest, this is a true shame. And then even for me, I find it doesn't look that great. I even loaded up World/Iceborne on my new rig and explored some of the worlds before making this review, and dare I say that game actually looks better, even though Wild was clearly made for next-gen consoles. So that's a really unfortunate reality we're living with less than a month since release. It's just that the game runs really poorly on PC. And I've heard that Capcom wanted to release it within the 2024 fiscal year, and man, I just hate that. I hate the business side of gaming so much. A game with this much hype and potential to release underbaked to satisfy earnings metrics. Shame on the leaders of Capcom who made this decision. And that brings me to another point, is that a lot of the skills right now in this game are just flat out bugged and broken. As of the writing of this script, Flayer, a skill that on paper should be excellent, isn't working as intended. The level 2 version of the skill is actually the best, even though it goes up to 5 skill points. This is extremely disheartening, especially as someone who likes to tinker and test. But sadly, you can't trust what the skills are saying because they don't work as intended. I watched a great video from Lord Vietner, a Monster Hunter creator, talking about this, and it seems that these skills weren't broken before release. Some creators did get early access to the game, so they had pre-made builds ready to go for the community for release, and now he's doing damage control because he said it worked before launch but not after launch. And I'm not sure how you remedy this, if it worked in a closed setting but not when released to the public. I know way too little about game development to comment, but as a consumer, it's very disappointing. So again, I don't know if delaying the release would actually fix all the broken skills, but if it would have, then it would have been nice to see them delay the release and iron out these details so that they had a polished game on launch. And back to that skill Flayer, it is based around creating wounds, which is maybe the biggest combat improvement that they made in Monster Hunter Wilds, and a big reason for why the game feels easier. There's now a wound system in the game, and you can proc skills and higher damage off of damaging wounds, and you can also break them. But they added a combat tool where you can specifically target wounds in what's called focus mode. Focus mode has been such a wonderful addition to combat. As a noob in World, I had tried Hammer at one point and I absolutely sucked with it because it had huge animation commitment, and if the monster moved, you'd just be SOL and miss your attack. Well, in Wilds, you can actually readjust your hard-hitting attacks on the fly with focus mode. I've hit so many Wyvern Blasts that I never would have hit in World because the monster moved, and this change has made combat feel so much better. So well done to the team on this one. The wound targeting attack on Gunlance is called the Drake Auger, and it's actually why I chose Gunlance. I tested all the weapons in the beta, and drilling into monsters' wounds and getting a knock after just felt so damn fun and powerful. No doubt focus mode is the reason people are finding this game easier, but honestly, going back and playing old Monster Hunter titles is gonna suck without it. And speaking of awesome combat mechanics, they also added another one called the Power Clash. You trigger this by blocking an enemy's attack, and you feel like a complete badass every time you get into one. Seriously, the combat in Monster Hunter Wilds has never felt better. It's the most fluid and intuitive combat we've had to date, and it feels really nice to play. Like I said, the bones of a great game are all here. So now that we have given them some proper credit on a lovely change to the core of the game, let's talk about something that needs a ton of work, and that is their menu design. The on-screen UI during combat is great, so I don't want to lump it in as general UI. I've seen some newcomers to the franchise requesting a monster health bar, and honestly, that would suck ass. And I'm sure they won't, but please never do that, Capcom. But for the love of God, in 2025, multiplayer should not be this cumbersome. I legitimately spent an hour on stream on the first day trying to play with my friend. We were in different parts of the story, which was the first issue, but then even when we did catch up to each other, we couldn't really play together. We would each have to launch the monster's intro cutscene separately, then back out of the quest, then navigate like 3 different layers of lobbies to finally join each other to fight the monsters, and then have to do it all again for the next monster. It was such a pain in the ass that we wound up just going at it solo and met up after the campaign when we hit high rank. I even made a video on how to join your friends because I thought it would help people, and I'm happy to say that the video is helping people, but I'm sad that I even had to make a video like that in the first place. You have to join a lobby, then invite them to the lobby, then to a link party, and then to an environment link. And it's not like these are easy to navigate menus either. Oh no. You have to click and look and click and do trial and error. I'm not joking, it was an hour with my Twitch and YouTube chat trying to help until we found it. Once you know what to do, it's okay, but even then, it's very unintuitive, and it demotivates you to want to play with your friends, especially so in the early game. And the menus in general are just quite janky. I'm over 60 hours in now, so I can manage my preset material loadouts and my weapon or build loadouts, but it's still cumbersome to set up, and doubly so on mouse and keyboard. I know a lot of people play this game on controller, but it is set up terribly for mouse and key. Like, the enter button just doesn't work, I have to hit F. There are many issues with the M&K layout. It's not unplayable, but it's certainly far from optimized. And just everything in general feels very unintuitive. Even setting investigations feels like you're clicking 4 buttons to do one task. And loading your map can't be done if you have a message on your side screen, something that is insanely bothersome because you're constantly getting notifications. One of these things on its own wouldn't feel so bad, but when added on top of each other with all the other issues, it makes it feel very clunky to navigate, and it definitely lessens your enjoyment. Again, I was on stream for my entire first 30 hours with the game, and I would be complaining about one thing being overcomplicated, and then someone asks, "Oh, how's Monster Hunter?" And I am genuinely enjoying the gameplay and fighting monsters and making builds, so I would say that. I would say I'm having fun, and that is good. Like, please, trust me, it's fun. It's just this particular thing is very annoying. Is it enough to ruin what the whole game has to offer? Absolutely not. But it's enough of a headache that definitely makes it worth mentioning in a review. So even though you will likely enjoy the game, there are definitely aspects that are far from perfect and need to be addressed. And having played other Monster Hunter games before, I was really hoping the menu navigation specifically would have gotten addressed. There is so much helpful info in this game, but it's buried behind such complicated menu controls that the people who need it the most, aka new players, are the same people who are the least likely to find it. So we've touched on story, gameplay, endgame progression, and optimization. To me, that pretty much covers it. Do I think Monster Hunter Wilds is worth playing? For me, absolutely. But if you've been on the fence about it, then I would honestly hold off. The game isn't going anywhere, and it is sure to get better with future patch updates. And hell, you might wait long enough for it to even go on sale. But right now, I think the performance issues on PC are bad enough that if you're on PC, you should definitely wait. And the endgame is shallow enough that you aren't going to be too far behind if you wait a few months to jump in. But if you have a soft spot for dinosaurs, which is what initially piqued my interest in this franchise back in 2018, and if you enjoy build crafting and min-maxing and love a game with a high skill ceiling to push yourself, then this game does it as well as any game out there. Here's hoping Capcom irons out the issues and introduces some new memorable monsters with strong and unique gear sets in the near future. The game has a ton of potential, but even in its current form, it's a good time. Happy hunting, and I'll catch you in the next one.